Okay, once you're ready to start painting this assignment here, I've got a couple things that I'm going to need just to begin. So for our first day, we want to get a good start on this. So you have some paper towels here. I've got some water, paint thinner. I've got my black paint, my palette, my canvas, and my picture. Okay. Now I've already gone through and sketched it all out. Okay, and I won't go through the steps on how to do that because we've covered how to do that already in our drawing packet. But if you find yourself struggling to get it all to fit, then let us know. Let your teachers know, and we'll be able to give you some help. But just as a couple general reminders to help you with that is consider using a grid by breaking it down, because I want you to enlarge it to fill this whole canvas here. Okay, when oil painting, it's typically a little harder to work smaller, so you want to try to work as large as you can, but at the same time on a size that's going to be manageable. So when we're painting in oils, this is really kind of our first painting assignment that we're going to work on. And the first two assignments were really just getting us used to how to use the brushes, how to mix the paint, and how to get specific values and control the paint. So now we're really going to work on building on all that stuff that we've learned. You still have to have good paint quality. You still have to mix the appropriate values. And hopefully you've already learned about how to shade various forms to create the illusion of depth and three-dimensionality to it. So right now, what I'm going to go over is how I would approach, or how I typically approach painting. Because with oil painting, you've got to learn the technique. And so the way you're going to start is you're going to apply first a really thin layer of paint on top to help to establish your drawing, but also to get that first layer of paint down, which is often called your underpainting. The purpose of the underpainting is to help fill in the canvas, and because canvas has a texture to it, so this underpainting, if you paint it relatively thin, it's going to fill in the canvas and fill in all those little holes on the canvas so they don't show up. But it also helps to, and the main reason why you do an underpainting is it helps to preserve your painting. Now remember that drawing packet, I had you take those two portraits and you had to simplify them down into just black and white shapes. Very graphic looking. And the reason why we did that is because of this exact step right here. Your underpainting, you're going to define your shadows and your light areas. So you're going to have to create that separation between everything that you're going to see as middle to dark and everything you're going to see that's middle to light. Okay, and leave that unpainted. Because when you paint things down, often it will cover up your drawing. You don't see it anymore. So you need to be able to preserve that image. So when you apply the future layers onto your canvas, it doesn't get lost. So when I do an underpainting, I'm going to take some of my black here, scoop it out. I don't need a whole lot of paint. Make sure you put your lid back on. I want to try to keep these paints from drying out as much as possible. It's a lot easier to use if you can keep them nice and wet. And when you do your underpainting, you're going to add quite a bit of water to it. It's almost like watercolor painting because it's going to be really pretty thin. So I'm just going to dip my brush in here, get it pretty wet. Okay, and so now that I've got my drawing created, I'm going to look at my picture, okay, and ask myself a couple important questions. Where do I see the middle to dark values? Every area that I see is middle to dark, I'm going to paint in with this paint here, okay? So I can see, first of all, I know the background's pretty dark, and so that for sure, I'm going to move this kind of out of the way just a little bit. Well, let's see. Let's move this. I have to move that just a little bit out of the way so I don't get paint all over it when I paint this in. Okay, so you can see when I put the paint down, it's going to really, let me zoom in really close so you can see what I'm doing. It's going to spread really easily, and it doesn't cover the canvas completely. You can still see it's kind of transparent. And I'm trying to be super careful around my edges so that my drawing doesn't get lost. Okay, so you see when your paint starts to get dry, it doesn't cover the canvas completely. You can see some of that texture of the canvas show through. So that's when you need to reload your brush, get some more paint on there. You don't want it super wet that it's going to cause all of your canvas to buckle. Make sure you're painting on the correct side. Canvas has a side that's has a layer of paint on it already called a gesso. That's to help preserve the canvas and to help your paint spread evenly, because canvas would suck up, because the fabric would suck up all that all the oils and cause your paint to blend, to be more difficult as it blends. But also it's slightly acidic, so it protects the canvas over time from yellowing. Okay, so I'm going to paint in all these areas here. Now, as a class, we're going to do this all together in as a class. So you guys can be painting while I paint. But this is our first step here. Do this underpainting. Now you can vary the thickness of your paint a little bit. So if you have one dark area that you don't want to get lost when you paint in one dark area next to another dark area, so you can kind of vary that a little bit, and sometimes I'll do that, but generally speaking, we want to keep it really graphic looking at this point. And many artists have just different ways of doing this. This is just what I find that most artists do and makes sense for me. So this is how I paint. Okay, make sure all those areas there are filled in. Okay, now it does kind of have this splotchy look to it too. It's not even and smooth, and that's fine. That's actually what you want. If you're painting in where you cover up the canvas immediately at this point, then it's too thick. You really want to make sure that you don't do that. Then my next point now is to go in and ask myself, where are these darker values here? And I can see all of these cast shadows being created by these objects here. Those are also all going to be painted in with this same layer here, because they're all that middle shade to dark. If you go out of the lines a little bit at this point, it's not a huge deal. But you want to try to avoid that as much as possible, because again, it kind of you lose your drawing if you're not too careful. Sometimes to get around these tight corners, I rotate my canvas so I can always see what I'm doing and kind of follow. You see how I'm following my edge with just the very tip of my brush, and I let the gravity just pull all that paint down to the tip. And when I can feel that it's starting to get too thin or I lose all my paint, then I can go and reload the brush with some more paint. Now I'm using my picture as my guide, trying to find out where all of those shadows are. Now I've got them drawn on my canvas, and so I know where all my shadows are. But use your eyes and carefully just observe what you're doing. Looks like I did not. Oh, let me move this up. So I missed my shadow over here, but I can tell where it is. It's going to go off like this. Now, as I do this, I'm not paying attention so much to the values, making sure the values are a match, as to just getting the shape and the drawing done. So here I'm going to put a little bit thicker paint because I want to be able to see that edge where this box and the table surface meet. So I've got a little darker paint there, but then I'm going to thin it out so I don't lose that edge. But that edge doesn't get lost as I paint all this in. Okay, so that looks like those are all my cast shadows I've painted in. Now I've got to ask myself, where are those core shadows that I also see as being in the darker range? Okay, so those, I'm also going to include those. I can see starting over here, I can see, let me move so this matches here. So I can see on this side over here, I can see a little darker core shadow right up there. So I'm going to put a little paint right there to mark that. I can see on the top of this cylinder over here, it also gets pretty dark. So that's going to be my darker range right there. I can see the core shadow goes down here, and this overall is darker than this shape over here. So, but I still see that these are kind of the middle to lighter range here, but over here is the darker range. So I'm going to paint in this core shadow through here. See that core shadow comes up around that edge. And that's a good separation between those two objects there, and then it wraps around this cylinder. You get a little bit of a highlight right here, which I'm also going to keep because I want to remember that that's where my highlight goes. Okay, this side over here is fairly dark in that darker range, so I'm going to darken in part of the shape here, but I don't want to get lost with that edge there, so I'm going to just leave it just a little bit lighter so I don't end up losing that in my drawing. Okay, I can see this is supposed to be a cone. It kind of curves all the way around. There's no hard edge to it, so that core shadow comes in right about around here. So I'm just going to put a line right there. On the sphere, I can see the core shadow goes here. Right there, it's kind of like a crescent shape, almost like the moon. Crescent moon right there. I can see the top of this is fairly darkened in. It's not catching the same light as the front side of the box here. So this is going to be included as well. You can see I've left it a little bit, my paint's a little bit thinner here, which helps to create a little bit of that separation there so my drawing's not lost. And so you can put that in there as well. And I can see this shape over here has this darker, this is in shadow here. So this is going to come up and be painted in as well. Okay, oh, I can see right here, this little box behind the ball is in shadow, so I'm going to include that as well. And just kind of look over it again, make sure I got everything. Okay, that's about it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So this is my underpainting for this entire paint project. So this is our goal for our first day of this assignment, is to get at least this far. So good luck. If you need some help, like I know, we'll be around to help you out. And but you want your painting to kind of look like this when you're done.